They say the subways swallow stories whole, voices that echo once and disappear forever into the tunnels. But that night, in the last train before midnight, a song broke through centuries of silence. She sang to a stranger who should never have been there. He listened like a man hearing his own funeral hymn. Neither knew the truth yet. Neither understood that some reunions don't heal wounds. They reopen them. The fluorescent lights of the subway station flickered like dying stars, casting pale shadows across cracked tiles that had seen better decades. It was 11:47 p.m., and the platform held only 3 souls. A sleeping homeless man curled against a pillar, a businesswoman scrolling mindlessly through her phone, and Ilara. Ilara sat cross-legged on the cold concrete floor, her back against a graffiti-covered wall, fingers moving across the worn strings of guitar that had more scratches than original finish. The case lay open before her, containing exactly $4.37, barely enough for tomorrow's breakfast, definitely not enough for rent. She was 23, but looked younger in the harsh station light, all sharp cheekbones and hollow eyes framed by dark hair that fell in waves she never had time to tame properly. Her clothes were clean but old, layered against the autumn chill that crept through every tunnel entrance. The thin jacket she wore had belonged to someone else once, bought from a thrift store that smelled like mothballs and forgotten lives. Her voice rose softly, tentatively, singing a melody she'd written herself about loneliness and city lights. The acoustics of the station made her sound ethereal, ghostly, as if she were singing from somewhere very far away. The businesswoman dropped 2 quarters into the guitar case without looking up. Ilara smiled and nodded, though the woman never saw it. She'd learned early that gratitude mattered, even when invisible. The train arrived with a mechanical groan, its doors sliding open to reveal a nearly empty car. Ilara gathered her guitar and case, stepping inside just before the doors hissed shut. She'd learned the subway's rhythm years ago, which trains were safest, which hours brought the most generous passengers, which drivers didn't mind when she played. The car smelled of industrial cleaner and something indefinably human, sweat, perfume, exhaustion. Ilara moved to the center, standing near a pole, and began to play again, louder now, filling the rattling space with sound. In the city of shadows, where nobody knows your name, that's when she saw him. He sat in the far corner, partially hidden in the space between the subway car's sections where the lights didn't quite reach. At first, she thought the seat was empty. The shadows there seemed so absolute. But then he shifted slightly, and she caught the outline of a man who radiated wrongness. Not danger, exactly, not threat, but something ancient and deeply, profoundly sad. Ilara had lived on streets and subways long enough to recognize every type of person. The drunks, the addicts, the mentally ill, the predators, the lost. This man was none of those things. He sat with perfect stillness, hands folded in his lap, dressed in what looked like an expensive dark suit that seemed decades out of style. His pale face caught fragments of passing tunnel lights, making his skin appear almost luminescent. But it was his eyes that stopped her mid-verse. Red, not bloodshot or irritated, actually red like garnets or wine held to candlelight. And they were fixed on nothing, staring past her, past the subway car, past the world itself, locked on some private agony she couldn't imagine. The other passengers, an elderly couple and 2 teenagers absorbed in their phones, paid him no attention at all. Ilara's fingers hesitated on the strings. Something in her chest tightened, an unfamiliar sensation that felt like recognition, though she'd never seen this man before in her life. She'd spent 23 years feeling like a puzzle with missing pieces, never quite fitting anywhere, never quite whole. And somehow, impossibly, this stranger's sadness felt familiar. She made a decision. Adjusting her guitar, Ilara walked slowly down the swaying car until she stood directly in front of him, close enough now to see details. The unnatural perfection of his features, the way his chest barely moved with breath, the ancient weight behind those crimson eyes. "Hi," she said softly. He didn't respond, didn't even blink. "I'm Ilara. I sing on the subways sometimes. For tips, mostly, but—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Sometimes just because someone looks like they need to hear music." Still nothing. but his fingers tightened almost imperceptibly against his knee. "You look like you're carrying the weight of the whole world," Ilara continued, her voice gentle. "I don't know what's hurting you, but I'd like to play something. Just for you, if that's okay." She didn't wait for permission. Something told her he wouldn't refuse, couldn't refuse. Ilara sat down on the seat across from him, close enough that the motion of the train occasionally made their knees almost touch. She positioned her guitar and closed her eyes for a moment, feeling for the right melody. When she began to play, it wasn't one of her usual songs. It was something that came from a place she didn't understand, a melody that felt like it had been sleeping in her bones her entire life, waiting for this exact moment. Soft and haunting, it moved through minor chords that spoke of loss and longing, of searching for something you couldn't name, of loving someone you'd never met. In the darkness before dawn, there's a voice that calls your name. In the silence of your heart, there's a love that feels the same. Though the years may steal your memory, and the world may steal your light, there's a thread that never breaks, pulling you through endless night. Constantine Draven, vampire king of the Eastern Territories, immortal lord of the Blood Courts, had not moved in 17 minutes and 43 seconds before the girl approached him. He'd been sitting in this exact position, locked as private hell, replaying the same memories he'd tortured himself with for 23 years. Marianne's face as she held their newborn daughter. Marianne's eyes as the illness took her. The baby's cries as he was forced to choose between revealing what he was, or letting them believe she had no father. He'd chosen wrong. He knew that now, had known it for decades. The baby, Ilara, they'd named her Ilara, had been given to Human Social Services, listed as an orphan, while he watched from shadows he could never leave. He'd followed her through every foster home, every hard night, every struggle, unable to intervene without exposing her to his world. A world of blood courts and ancient laws that would see her dead simply for existing. Half human, half vampire, damper, an abomination to the old families. A death sentence wrapped in his child's laugh. So he'd stayed away, let her live as human, let her survive without knowing the monster who'd fathered her. Every night was agony. Every year stretched like centuries. And tonight, weak from hunger he refused to satisfy and drowning in guilt he couldn't escape, Constantine had done something he'd avoided for 23 years. He'd gotten on the same subway car she was singing in, just to hear her voice once, just to see her alive, just to torture himself with the daughter he'd abandoned. He hadn't expected her to notice him. No human ever did when he wrapped shadows around himself. He was a ghost in their world, present but unseen, watching but never touching. But Ilara had seen him, and now she was singing directly to him, and every note was a knife in his ancient heart, because the melody, God, the melody she was creating, was one he'd hummed to Marianne when they'd first fallen in love. A tune he'd never shared with anyone else, never played anywhere she could have heard it. It had died with Marianne, or should have. But here was his daughter, sitting 3 feet away, playing his love song back to him with tears streaming down her face, though she didn't seem to notice she was crying. Constantine's hands began to tremble. 23 years of perfect control shattered like glass. His eyes, which he kept carefully fixed on nothing, slowly, inevitably, moved to meet hers. And Ilara, still playing, still singing, felt the moment their gazes connected like an electric current running through her entire body. Those red eyes were no longer empty. They were burning with something so intense it should have frightened her. But it didn't. Instead, she felt something impossible click into place inside her chest, like a lock finding its key after a lifetime of being broken. The song ended. The subway car rattled on through darkness. And neither of them moved, caught a moment that felt like destiny's hand finally, terribly, closing around them both. "Who are you?" Ilara whispered. Constantine's lips moved, but no sound came out at first. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with disuse and thick with centuries of accumulated sorrow. "Someone who shouldn't be here. Why did you cry when I played?" "I didn't cry." But his eyes told a different truth. Ilara leaned forward slightly, searching his face. "I've never seen eyes like yours. Are they contacts?" A bitter smile crossed his perfect features. No. Are you sick? You're very pale. In a manner of speaking. The train began to slow, approaching the next station. The teenagers got off. The elderly couple remained, dozing against each other. The car was essentially empty now, just Alara and this impossible stranger and the weight of questions hanging between them. I'm going to keep riding for a while, Alara said suddenly. I have nowhere I need to be. Do you? Constantine stared at her, his daughter, his child, his greatest love and deepest regret, and knew he should say yes, should leave, should disappear back into the shadows where he belonged. But he'd been strong for 23 years. Tonight he was weak. No, he said quietly. I have nowhere to be. Alara smiled, and it transformed her tired face into something radiant. Then I'll play for you some more, if you want. I want, Constantine whispered, and it was both truth and tragedy. So she played, song after song, filling the subway car with melodies while the train moved through its endless loop beneath the city. And Constantine sat perfectly still, drowning in the voice of the daughter who didn't know him, memorizing every note like a dying man taking his last breath. Neither of them noticed the figure watching from the next car over, a tall woman with silver eyes and a knowing smile, who hadn't been there moments before and wouldn't be there moments later. Some reunions, she thought, were written in starlight and blood. This one had been written long ago. And now, finally, the story was beginning. The woman disappeared like smoke, leaving only the faintest scent of ozone and destiny behind. The subway became their sanctuary for 3 hours that night. Alara played until her fingers ached, until the calluses on her fingertips burned with each press against the strings. The stranger, she still didn't know his name, never moved from his position, never spoke unless she asked him direct questions, and even then his answers were careful, measured, as if each word cost him something precious. But he listened. God, how he listened. It was the kind of attention Alara had craved her entire life without knowing it. Not the distracted nod of social workers, not the pitying glances of foster parents who'd cycled through her childhood like seasons. This was something else entirely, a focus so complete it made her feel like she was the only person in the universe. Around 2 a.m., the subway's rhythm changed. The trains ran less frequently now, and the few remaining passengers were either too drunk or too exhausted to notice the pale man and the singing girl who'd claimed the back car as their own. You should eat, Constantine said suddenly, breaking a long silence after Alara had finished a particularly haunting melody about stars and loneliness. She blinked, surprised he'd initiated conversation. I'm fine. You're not. His eyes, those impossible red eyes, swept over her with an intensity that made her shiver. When did you last have a real meal? I had a sandwich yesterday. It was a lie. The sandwich had been 2 days ago, and it had only been half of one, split with another street musician who'd been worse off than her. Constantine's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. The station above us has a 24-hour diner. I'll take you there. I can't afford. I didn't ask if he could afford it. His voice was gentle but absolute. Please, let me do this one thing. There was something in his tone that made refusal impossible, a weight of need that matched her own, though she couldn't understand why the stranger would care whether she ate or starved. Okay, Alara said softly, but only if you eat too. Something flickered across his face, pain or perhaps dark amusement. I'll have coffee. They exited the next stop, climbing the stained concrete steps into the 3 a.m. version of the city. The streets were different at this hour, emptier and more honest. The facades people wore during daylight hours fell away, leaving only the raw truth of urban existence. The homeless in their cardboard kingdoms, the night shift workers trudging toward or away from their labor, the few remaining bars spilling music and desperate laughter into the darkness. The diner was a relic from another era, all chrome and cracked vinyl, with a flickering neon sign that read Mike's, though half the letters were dead. Inside it smelled like burnt coffee and fried eggs and salvation. Alara slid into a booth by the window, placing her guitar carefully beside her. Constantine sat across from her, and for the first time she saw him in proper light. Not the flickering fluorescence of the subway, but the steady, if dingy, illumination of the diner. He was beautiful. Not handsome, Beauty was the only word that fit. Ageless and perfect, with features so symmetrical they looked carved from marble. His dark hair fell to his shoulders in waves that somehow managed to look both elegant and wild. The suit he wore was indeed old-fashioned, cut in a style she vaguely recognized from old movies, 1940s maybe or 50s, and his skin in direct light was so pale it seemed almost translucent, as if she could see the blue tracery of veins beneath the surface. Except she couldn't. There were no visible veins, no subtle flush of blood beneath his skin. He looked like a porcelain doll, flawless and empty. "You're staring," Constantine said quietly, his eyes fixed on the laminated menu he hadn't actually looked at. "Sorry, you're very striking. Is that what they call it now?" There was bitter humor in his voice. A waitress approached, middle-aged, tired, with kind eyes and a name tag that read Dolores. She pulled out a pad and pencil. "What can I get you kids?" "Pancakes," Elara said immediately, then hesitated. "And eggs. And is it okay to order a lot?" Dolores glanced at Constantine, who nodded once. "Get whatever you want, honey. This gentleman's paying, and he looks like he can afford it." "How do you know?" Elara asked. Dolores laughed. 30 years waiting tables, sweetie. You learn to spot the ones with money." She turned to Constantine. "And you, sir?" "Coffee. Black." That's it. When Dolores left, Elara leaned forward across the table. "Why are you doing this? You don't know me." "Don't I?" The words slipped out before Constantine could stop them. Elara's eyes widened. "What does that mean?" He was quiet for a long moment, his hands folded on the table in front of him with that same perfect stillness he'd maintained in the subway. When he finally spoke, his voice was careful. "You remind me of someone I knew once. Someone I cared about very much." "Who?" "Someone I lost." The raw pain in those 3 words made Elara's throat tighten. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. It was my own fault." The food arrived faster than expected. Stacks of pancakes, scrambled eggs, bacon, toast, orange juice, coffee. Dolores had clearly decided Elara needed feeding and had brought enough for 3 people. She set everything down with practiced efficiency and disappeared again. Elara stared at the feast before her, and suddenly, without warning, tears began streaming down her face. "What's wrong?" Constantine's voice was sharp with concern. "Nothing. She wiped her eyes roughly with the back of her hand. "Nobody's ever just fed me before. Not like this. Not without wanting something." Constantine's hands clenched into fists on the table. The fluorescent light above them flickered violently for a moment before steadying. "Eat," he said hoarsely. "Please eat." She did. Slowly at first, then with the desperate hunger of someone who'd been rationing every meal for weeks. Constantine watched every bite with an expression that cycled between satisfaction and agony, sipping his untouched coffee as a prop. "Tell me about yourself," he said after a while. "Your family. Your history." Elara swallowed a mouthful of pancake. "Not much to tell. I grew up in foster care. Never knew my parents. I was found as a baby, apparently. Left at a hospital with just a first name pinned to my blanket." She shrugged, tried to make it sound casual, though the words still hurt after 23 years. "Bounced around different homes until I aged out of the system at 18. Been on my own since then." "No one ever adopted you?" "Almost once, when I was 7. But then," she trailed off, the memory still sharp, "they changed their minds. Said I was too difficult. Too different." "Different how?" "I don't know. I was just a kid. But people always said I was strange, that I gave them weird feelings. Like I didn't quite belong anywhere." She laughed without humor. "Story of my life. Really, never fitting in. Never quite human enough for the human world." The coffee cup in Constantine's hand cracked, not shattered, just developed a single hairline fracture that spread like a spider web across the ceramic. He set it down carefully, his expression unreadable. "Are you okay?" Elara asked. "I'm fine. Continue." "There's not much more. I left the last foster home at 18, been surviving on music and odd jobs ever since. It's not a great life, but it's mine. And sometimes, she paused, looking out the window at the empty street. Sometimes I wonder about them, my real parents, whether they're alive, whether they think about me, whether there was a good reason they gave me up, or if I just wasn't wanted. You were wanted. The words erupted from Constantine with such force that Alara jumped. You were wanted more than breath itself. Never doubt that. She stared at him, startled by the vehemence. How could you possibly know that? Constantine closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, they were bright with unshed tears that looked black in the diner's light. Because no parent who truly didn't want their child would carry that grief for a lifetime. The ones who abandon out of malice forget and move on. It's the ones who abandon out of love, out of desperate, terrible love, who never stop bleeding. The air between them grew thick with unspoken truth. Alara's heart was pounding, though she couldn't say why. You're not talking about hypothetical parents anymore, are you? No. Who did you lose? Everyone. His voice was barely a whisper. I lost everyone. Before Alara could respond, the diner's door chimed. 3 men walked in, young, loud, drunk. They stumbled to a booth on the other side of the restaurant, their voices carrying across the empty space. One of them noticed Alara and nudged his friends. Hey, check out the homeless chick. Constantine's entire body went rigid. Bet she'd suck dick for a 20. Another one laughed. Alara kept her eyes on her plate, her face burning. This wasn't new. Street musicians dealt with this kind of harassment regularly. She'd learned to ignore it, to make herself small and invisible until the danger passed. But Constantine was standing. Don't. Alara whispered urgently, grabbing his wrist. His skin was ice cold beneath her fingers. It's not worth it. I'm used to it. You shouldn't be. His voice was no longer human. It resonated with something ancient and absolutely lethal. You should never have to be used to being treated like garbage. The drunk men were laughing at something else now, distracted by their own conversation. They hadn't noticed Constantine's reaction. Dolores appeared from the kitchen, reading the situation immediately. Sir, why don't you and your daughter finish eating? I'll handle those boys if they get out of line. Daughter. The word hung in the air like a thunderclap. Constantine sat down slowly, his eyes never leaving Alara's face. She was staring at him with an expression that was equal parts confusion and dawning realization. She called me your daughter, Alara said slowly. She made an assumption. Did she? Alara's voice was shaking now. You said, I reminded you of someone you lost. You said parents who abandon out of love never stop bleeding. You're looking at me like I'm the answer to a question you've been asking your whole life. And Dolores took one look at us and saw a father and daughter. Constantine said nothing. His silence was confirmation enough. No, Alara whispered. That's crazy. You can't be? I can. I am. The words came out broken, defeated. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have come tonight. I should have stayed away like I've stayed away for 23 years. But I was weak and I needed to see you. Just once. Just to know you were alive and well. But I'm not well. Alara's voice cracked. I'm living on subway tips and sleeping in shelters. Where have you been? Why didn't you help me? Why didn't you? Because my world would have killed you. Constantine's eyes blazed. Because the moment the blood courts knew you existed, they would have hunted you like an animal and destroyed you for the crime of being born. Because I loved you so much that I gave up everything, including you, to keep you alive. Blood courts? What are you talking about? Constantine reached up slowly and tapped the corner of his eye. You asked earlier if these were contacts. They're not. This is what I am, Alara. This is why I could never be part of your life. I don't understand. Yes, you do. Somewhere deep inside, you've always known you were different, that you didn't fit in the human world because you're not entirely human. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Your mother was human. I am not. I am vampire. Vampire royalty, in fact. And you, my precious daughter, are something that shouldn't exist. Something beautiful and impossible, and so incredibly dangerous that I spent every night for 23 years terrified that someone would discover what you are. The diner seemed to tilt around Alara. You're insane. Am I? Constantine's smile was sad. Look at me, Alara. Really look. No breath. No heartbeat. No warmth. I'm wearing a suit from 1952 because that's when I stopped caring about fashion. And it doesn't matter because I don't age. I've been sitting in that subway for hours because I don't eat food. I can't digest it. And I shattered that cup with nothing but the force of my emotion because I'm holding back strength that could bend steel. Alara was shaking her head, but her eyes told a different story. Because now that he'd said it, she could see it. The unnatural stillness. The predatory grace. The way the drunk men across the restaurant were unconsciously leaning away from their side of the diner, as if sensing a threat they couldn't consciously identify. Prove it, she whispered. Constantine glanced at Dolores, who was pointedly not watching them from behind the counter. Then he reached across the table and took Alara's hand gently in his own. His skin was corpse cold, and then with excruciating slowness he squeezed. Not hard enough to hurt. Constantine would have torn his own heart out before hurting her, but hard enough that she could feel the incredible strength being held in careful check, like holding hands with a hydraulic press. He released her and turned his palm upward. In the shadowy corner of the booth, away from Dolores' line of sight, he let his fingernails extend into claws, black, sharp, clearly not human. They retracted a moment later. I've killed to protect you, Constantine said quietly. People who got too close to discovering what you were. Vampires who caught your scent. I've stayed in the shadows of your life like a ghost, watching you grow up from a distance, making sure you survived even though I couldn't be there. And every single day has been torture knowing you were struggling and I couldn't help. Because helping would mean revealing myself. And revealing myself would mean signing your death warrant. Tears were streaming down Alara's face now. My mother? Mary Ann. She was a violinist. I met her in 1999, and I broke every vampire law by falling in love with her. We had 2 years together before she got pregnant. She died 6 months after you were born. Human childbirth complications involving a damper baby. I was forced to choose, raise you myself and expose you to vampire politics that would see you dead within a year, or let you live as human and watch from afar. His voice broke. I chose wrong. I know I chose wrong. But at the time, keeping you alive seemed more important than keeping you happy. Damper, Alara repeated numbly. That's what I am. Half vampire, half human. You have my blood, but not the full transformation. You'll age normally, need food, live a mostly human life. But you're stronger than humans, faster, and you carry a scent that vampires can detect. The scent of royal blood. To the old families, you're an abomination, a threat to bloodline purity. Is that why I've always felt different? Why people always said I was strange? Probably. Humans can sense predators on an instinctual level. You register as other even if they don't know why. Alara pulled her hand away from his, wrapping her arms around herself. I don't know if I can believe this. It sounds like something from a bad movie. I know, but I do believe it. She laughed, the sound verging on hysterical. That's the crazy part. Everything you're saying is insane, but it makes more sense than anything else in my entire life. All those times I felt like I didn't belong, I didn't. Because I'm not human. Not fully. You're human enough, Constantine said fiercely. You're more human than I've been in centuries. You have your mother's heart, her kindness, her music. The vampire blood just makes you extraordinary instead of ordinary. Does this mean I'll become? She couldn't finish the sentence. No. Damper don't become full vampires unless they undergo a specific transformation ritual, and I'll die before I let that happen to you. You'll live a human lifespan. Maybe a bit longer than normal, maybe a bit healthier, but you'll live and die as something close to human. Close to. Alara shook her head. I don't even know what to call you. Father? Dad? Stranger who shares my DNA. Call me Constantine. It's the name I was born with, before titles and courts and kingdoms. And you don't have to call me anything at all. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect understanding. He faltered. I just wanted you to know the truth before I disappeared again. You're leaving? I have to. Now that we've talked, Now that you know, the risk is even greater. If the courts discover we've had contact, let them discover it. Illyra's voice was suddenly strong. I've spent 23 years alone. I just found out my father is alive and has been watching over me this whole time. You think I'm letting you disappear? Illyra? No. She leaned forward intently. You said you've killed to protect me. You've spent decades making sure I survived. Well, I survived. I'm still here. And now I'm choosing to know you, consequences or not. You don't understand what you're risking. Neither do you. Her eyes blazed with emotion. You've been protecting me from vampire politics and blood courts and whatever else. But do you have any idea what foster care does to a kid? What being abandoned does? I've survived things that would break most people. If I can survive being thrown away by the only world I knew, I can survive learning about another one. Constantine stared at his daughter, this fierce, broken, beautiful human who'd inherited Marianne's courage and apparently none of his cautiousness, and felt something crack in his chest that had been frozen for 23 years. You inherited your mother's stubbornness too, he said softly. Good. Then you know I'm not backing down. He was quiet for a long moment. Outside the window, dawn was beginning to threaten the eastern sky with pale gray light. Constantine could feel it coming like a pressure against his skin. Not deadly, not yet, but uncomfortable. A reminder that he was a creature of night, trying to linger in a world of daylight. If we do this, he said finally, there will be rules, precautions. You cannot tell anyone what you are. You cannot go searching for information about vampire culture or courts. And you must let me teach you how to protect yourself. From what? From everything. His expression was grim. The vampire world is not kind. Illyra. It's ancient and political and vicious. There are factions that would see me destroyed just for the crime of loving your mother. And you're leverage against me now. A weakness that can be exploited. So what do? We prepare. I teach you to fight, to sense danger, to hide what you are. And in return, he hesitated. In return, I get to know you, as much as I'm able. Deal. Illyra stuck out her hand. Constantine looked at it, the simple human gesture of agreement, and felt tears finally spill down his cheeks. He took her hand in his, careful of his strength, and shook it gently. I'm sorry, he whispered, for everything you suffered, for not being there, for being too much of a coward to stay. You're here now. Illyra's own eyes were wet. That's what matters. Dolores approached the table with the check, reading the emotional temperature immediately. She set it down without a word and disappeared again. Constantine pulled out a wallet, old leather, worn smooth, and placed several $100 bills on the table, far more than the meal cost. For her patience, he said to Illyra, and because she called you my daughter and didn't ask questions. They left the diner as the sun began to truly rise, painting the city in shades of gold and amber. Constantine walked beside his daughter, and felt simultaneously more alive and more terrified than he'd been in centuries. Where do you live? He asked as they descended back toward the subway. Shelter near 52nd Street, when I can get a bed. Otherwise, wherever. Constantine's jaw clenched. Not anymore. I have properties throughout the city. Safe houses, mostly. You'll stay in one of them. I don't want your charity. It's not charity. It's protection. His tone left no room for argument. If someone comes looking for you, I need to know where you are. Someone like who? Like the vampires who've been watching me for the last several weeks. Constantine's voice was grim. I thought I'd been careful, but clearly not careful enough. Someone knows I've broken pattern. Someone knows I'm interested in you. We may have less time than I hoped. A chill ran down Illyra's spine. What happens if they find out what I am? Then I fight. Constantine's eyes blazed red in the morning light. And for a moment, Illyra saw not the sad stranger from the subway, but something ancient and powerful and absolutely lethal. I fight like I should have fought 23 years ago. And this time, I don't surrender. I don't run. I protect my daughter with every drop of blood in my mortal veins, and I make sure anyone who threatens you regrets the day they were born. Promise me something, Illyra said quietly. Anything. Promise you won't disappear again. No matter what happens, no matter how dangerous it gets. You don't leave me alone." Constantine pulled her into a careful embrace, mindful of his strength, and pressed his face into her dark hair. She smelled like her mother had, like music and hope, and everything good he thought he'd lost forever. "I promise," he whispered against her hair. "I swear on everything I am and everything I've ever loved. I'm not leaving you again. Not now. Not ever." Above them, perched on the edge of a building they couldn't see, the silver-eyed woman smiled. The game had begun, and the pawns, finally, were moving into place. The safe house was nothing like Elara expected. She'd imagined something Gothic, all stone walls and velvet curtains and cobwebs and corners. Instead, Constantine led her to a converted loft in an industrial part of the city, all exposed brick and modern furniture and floor-to-ceiling windows that currently had blackout curtains drawn against the rising sun. "It's temporary," Constantine explained as he unlocked 3 separate deadbolts with keys that looked older than cars. "One of several properties I maintain. This one has the advantage of being warded. Warded, protected by magic, old magic." He pushed open the door and gestured her inside. "Any vampire who tries to enter without my permission will find themselves extremely uncomfortable. Not dead. There are treaties that prevent me from making truly lethal wards, but uncomfortable enough that they'll think twice." The loft was sparse but clean. A kitchen area with appliances that looked unused. A bathroom with pristine white tiles. And a main living space containing a couch, a bookshelf crammed with volumes in multiple languages, and little else. No bed, Elara noticed. "You don't sleep?" she asked. "Not in the traditional sense. I can go dormant for periods of time, usually during daylight hours. But it's not sleep. It's more like shutting down unnecessary processes." Constantine moved to the windows and checked each curtain carefully. "You'll take the bedroom upstairs. There's a door that locks from the inside. Use it, not because I don't trust myself, but because the wards only slow intruders. They don't stop them entirely." Elara climbed the metal staircase to find a loft bedroom that was surprisingly comfortable. An actual bed with clean sheets, a dresser, even a small desk. A room that looked lived in, though she suspected it hadn't been occupied in years. "Whose room was this?" she called down. Constantine's voice drifted up, carefully neutral. "Yours. I've maintained it since you were born, just in case. Just in case she needed him. Just in case he failed and she discovered the truth. Just in case the universe gave him one more chance." Elara sank onto the bed, overwhelmed. 24 hours ago, she'd been alone in the world. Now she had a father, a heritage, and apparently a bedroom that had been waiting for her for 23 years. She should be terrified. Any rational person would be. Instead, she felt something she'd never quite experienced before, belonging. "Get some rest," Constantine called. "I'll be downstairs if you need me. We'll talk more when you wake up." Elara meant to argue. She had too many questions, too much to process. But the moment her head hit the pillow, exhaustion crashed over her like a wave. She'd been running on empty for so long that having actual safety, actual shelter, was enough to shut down her body's emergency protocols. She fell asleep immediately. Downstairs, Constantine stood motionless in the center of the living room, his hands clenched at his sides, listening to his daughter's breathing slow into sleep. 23 years. 23 years of distance. And now she was here, 30 feet away, under his protection. The magnitude of it threatened to break him. A soft knock on the door interrupted his crisis. Constantine's eyes blazed red instantly, his body shifting into a combat stance. The wards hadn't triggered, which meant either the visitor was human or they were powerful enough to bypass his protections without setting them off. Neither option was reassuring. He approached the door silently, listening. One heartbeat on the other side. Female. Calm. "You can hear me, Constantine," a voice said through the door. Familiar. Old. "I'm not here to fight. I'm here to deliver a message." He knew that voice. Constantine opened the door to find Seraphine standing in the hallway. Lady Seraphine of the Silver Court, one of the oldest vampires in the city and a member of the Council of Elders. She looked exactly as she had a century ago, tall and elegant, with silver hair that matched her eyes and a smile that could mean either salvation or damnation. Sarah, his voice was cold. I don't recall inviting you. You didn't, but the council knows Constantine. They know about the girl. Every muscle in his body locked. How? Aldrich has informants everywhere. One of them spotted you in the subway with a human girl who made you cry. Aldrich being Aldrich. He investigated, and being thorough as always, he discovered what she is. Seraphine's expression was sympathetic. I'm sorry. I tried to keep it quiet, but it's too late. Word has reached the High Court. Fuck. Constantine's control slipped, his hand splintering the doorframe. What's the verdict? You're summoned to tribunal. Tomorrow night. The High Court wants to hear your explanation for breaking the miscegenation laws, for creating a damper, and for hiding her existence for over 2 decades. And Alara is to be brought before them as well, for evaluation. Absolutely not. Constantine's voice dropped to a lethal whisper. I will not bring my daughter before those sadistic bastards, so they can evaluate whether she deserves to live. You don't have a choice. If you refuse, the council will issue a blood hunt. You'll both be declared outlaw, and every vampire in the Eastern Territories will have permission to kill you on sight. Let them try. Constantine. Seraphine stepped closer, her voice urgent. I know you're one of the most powerful vampires alive. I know you could kill half the court before they brought you down. But they will bring you down, and then Alara dies anyway. At least if you attend the tribunal. There's a chance to argue for her life. What kind of chance? Slim, but present. Seraphine glanced up the stairs, toward where Alara slept. She's beautiful, by the way. Looks like Marianne, but has your eyes. Red eyes on a damper. The old family's going to lose their minds. Why are you helping me? Because you were kind to me once when I was newly turned and terrified. Because I love Marianne too, in my own way. And because... She paused. Because the blood courts have become stagnant and cruel. Maybe a damper princess is exactly the scandal they need. She's not a princess. She's your daughter. You're the vampire king of the Eastern Territories, whether you use the title or not. That makes her royalty. Seraphine pulled an envelope from her coat. The official summons. Tomorrow night, midnight, the Cathedral of Shadows. Bring Alara. And Constantine, prepare her. The tribunal won't be gentle. She was gone before he could respond, disappearing with the supernatural speed that marked elder vampires. Constantine stood in the doorway, holding the summons, and felt the walls of his carefully constructed life collapse around him. He'd known this day would come eventually, had spent 23 years preparing for it, but knowing and experiencing were different things. Alara woke to the smell of coffee and sound of someone moving around downstairs. For a confused moment, she thought she was still in a shelter, that the previous night had been a strange dream. Then she saw the room, her room, supposedly, and remembered. Vampire, father, damper, Jesus, she muttered, sitting up and rubbing her face. The clock on the nightstand read 6:47 p.m. She'd slept for almost 12 hours. Alara descended the stairs to find Constantine standing in the kitchen, staring at a coffee maker with the expression of someone who'd forgotten how human appliances worked. I thought you didn't eat, she said. He turned, and she saw the strain in his face immediately. Whatever had happened while she slept, it wasn't good. The coffee is for you. I'm attempting to remember how to operate this machine. Despite everything, Alara smiled. Here, let me. She moved past him and began the familiar ritual of making coffee. Constantine watched her with an intensity that should have been uncomfortable, but somehow wasn't. We need to talk, he said quietly. That sounds ominous. It is. He waited until she had a steaming cup in her hands before continuing. The vampire courts know about you. We've been summoned to appear before the High Council tomorrow night. The cup shook in Alara's hands. What does that mean? It means they're going to interrogate us about how you came to exist and whether you pose a threat to vampire society. Constantine's voice was carefully controlled. It means we have less than 24 hours to prepare you for the most dangerous night of your life. Can't we just not go? If we don't appear, they'll declare blood hunt. Every vampire in the city, possibly every vampire in the country, will be hunting us. We'd be running forever, and eventually they'd catch us. But if we go, they might kill me anyway. Yes. He didn't lie to her, didn't sugarcoat it. That's a possibility. Illyria set the coffee down with trembling hands. What are my chances? I don't know. It depends on who speaks to the prosecution, who's on the council, what evidence they present. Dhampirs are controversial. Some vampires see them as abominations. Others see them as curiosities. Very few see them as having any rights. What do you see me as? As my daughter. The answer was immediate and absolute, as the most important person in my existence. And I will do everything in my power to convince the council that you deserve to live. And if you can't convince them, Constantine's eyes blaze red. Then I fight my way out with you, kill everyone who tries to stop us, and we disappear into a part of the world where the High Court has no jurisdiction. Australia, maybe, or Siberia. Somewhere they won't find us easily. You do that, give up everything. I already gave up everything 23 years ago when I let you go. His voice cracked. I'm not making that mistake twice. Illyria moved around the counter and, before she could second-guess herself, wrapped her arms around her father's waist. He stood frozen for a moment, clearly in use of physical affection, before his arms came up carefully to return the embrace. Thank you, she whispered against his chest, for protecting me, for coming back. I never left. Not really. His hand came up to stroke her hair, the gesture heartbreakingly tender. I've been in the shadows of your life since the day you were born. I was there when you took your first steps, when you sang your first song, when that foster family rejected you and you cried for 3 days straight. I couldn't comfort you, couldn't hold you, but I was there. That must have been torture. But it was also a privilege. Watching you grow into the strong, talented, remarkable person, that was worth every moment of pain. They stood like that for a long time, father and daughter, making up for 23 years of misembraces. Finally, Constantine pulled back gently. We need to start your training. Training for what? For survival. The tribunal will test you, physically, mentally, perhaps even magically. You need to understand what you're capable of as a damper. He gestured toward the open space of the loft. First lesson, you're stronger than you think. I don't feel strong. That's because you've never tried. Constantine picked up a wooden chair and placed it in front of her. Lift this. Illyria gave him a skeptical look, but wrapped her hands around the chair and lifted. It came up easily, too easily, like lifting a house cat instead of furniture. What the hell? You have vampire strength, muted but present. You're approximately 3 times stronger than a human woman your size. With training, you could be even stronger. Constantine pulled out his phone and showed her a video of a young man doing parkour across rooftops. You're also faster and more agile. Your reflexes are heightened. Your senses are sharper. All the advantages of vampire physiology, without most of the weaknesses. Most? You'll need to feed occasionally. Illyria's face went pale. On blood. Not the way vampires do. You can survive on regular food, but you'll be healthier if you supplement with blood about once a month. Animal blood works fine. Beef blood from a butcher, for example. Or blood bank donations, if you have access. It doesn't have to be human, and it doesn't have to be fresh. That's disgusting. It's biology. Your body processes nutrients differently than humans. The iron and proteins in blood help you maintain your enhanced abilities. Constantine's tone was matter-of-fact. I know it's not pleasant to hear, but you need to understand what you are. What else? Sunlight won't kill you, but you'll be more sensitive to it. You'll probably prefer night hours. Crucifixes and holy water are myths. They'll do nothing to you. Garlic is just garlic. Running water won't hurt you. He paused. But other vampires can hurt you. Badly. You don't have our healing factor. So injuries that would inconvenience an elder vampire could kill you. Great. So I'm stronger than humans, but weaker than vampires. Best of both worlds. You're unique. That's more valuable than you realize. Constantine moved a bookshelf and pulled out a leather-bound journal. Your mother kept this while she was pregnant with you. She documented everything, her symptoms, her fears, her hopes. I want you to read it before tomorrow night. Elara took the journal with shaking hands. Why? Because the council will ask you questions about your heritage, your loyalty, your understanding of what you are, and because... He struggled with the words. Because Marianne was extraordinary, and you deserve to know her through her own words, not just my memories. Tears blurred Elara's vision. What was she like? Kind, brave, talented beyond measure. She played violin for the city orchestra and gave private lessons to children who couldn't afford regular instructors. She had this way of making everyone feel seen and valued. When she smiled, it was like the sun coming out. Constantine's voice was thick with emotion. She knew what I was from the beginning. I couldn't hide it from her, and she chose me anyway. Loved me despite knowing what loving me would cost. Did she know she was dying? Near the end, yes. The pregnancy was difficult. Damper births are always risky for human mothers. She hemorrhaged internally, developed preeclampsia. Human doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong because they didn't know half of your DNA wasn't human. He closed his eyes. She made me promise not to turn her. Made me swear that if it came down to choosing between saving her as a vampire or letting her die human, I'd let her go. She didn't want immortality. She wanted to live fully as herself, even if that life was short. And you honor that promise. I did, even though it killed me to do it. Constantine opened his eyes, and they were wet. She died holding you. Her last words were, protect her. Not avenge me, not destroy the courts, just protect her. And I've been trying to keep that promise ever since. Elara was openly crying now, clutching the journal to her chest. I wish I could have known her. You will, through that. He nodded at the journal. And through yourself, you have her spirit. Elara, her courage, her heart. That's why I knew you'd survive even without me, because you're Marianne's daughter as much as you're mine. They spent the next several hours training. Constantine taught Elara basic self-defense, showed her how to leverage her enhanced strength, explained the social hierarchies of vampire courts, in which elders were likely to be sympathetic versus hostile. Aldrich is the one to worry about, Constantine said during a break. He's the head of the old family's faction, vampires who believe in bloodline purity above all else. He sees Dampiers as genetic contamination. If he controls the tribunal, your chances drop significantly. And if he doesn't, then it depends on Seraphine and the moderate faction. They're fewer in number, but politically influential. If Seraphine speaks for us, we have a chance. She helped you before. Why? Because she's complicated. She follows vampire law, but she doesn't necessarily agree with all of it. And because... Constantine hesitated. Because she loved your mother too. Not romantically, but deeply. Marianne had that effect on people, human and vampire alike. As midnight approached, Constantine called a halt to the training. You need rest. Tomorrow will be grueling. Will you sleep? Elara asked. I'll keep watch. Just in case. In case of what? In case someone decides to solve the problem before the tribunal meets. His expression was grim. Not everyone will want to wait for official judgment. Elara didn't argue. She took her mother's journal upstairs and read it cover to cover, crying through half the entries. Marianne's voice came through clearly in the pages. Warm, funny, deeply in love with Constantine despite understanding the impossibility of their situation. She'd written about feeling the baby move, about choosing the name Elara because it meant star, and she hoped her daughter would shine even in darkness. The final entry, written 2 weeks before Marianne died, read, If you're reading this, my darling girl, it means I didn't survive to tell you these things myself. I'm sorry for that. I wanted so badly to know you, to watch you grow, to teach you all the songs I've learned. But if I don't make it, Know this. You are wanted. Desperately, completely wanted. Your father and I created you out of love. So deep it defied every law and boundary between our worlds. That kind of love doesn't fade. It doesn't end. Even if I'm gone, even if your father has to stay in the shadows, that love surrounds you always. You are half human, half vampire, and entirely extraordinary. Don't let anyone tell you that you're wrong or broken or shouldn't exist. You are the bridge between two worlds, my star. You are hope made flesh. Lie boldly. Love fiercely. And if you ever feel alone, look up at the night sky and remember, I'm there watching over you. Always. Love, eternally. Mom. Elara closed the journal and pressed it to her heart, sobbing silently so Constantine wouldn't hear downstairs. Her mother had known, had understood the cost, and paid it willingly, had loved her daughter enough to die for her, and her father had loved them both enough to live in agony for 23 years, protecting from a distance, suffering alone. Elara had spent her whole life feeling unwanted. Now she understood she'd been cherished beyond measure, just not in ways she could see. Tomorrow, she'd face the vampire courts. Tomorrow, she'd fight for her right to exist. Tomorrow, she might die. But tonight, for the first time in her life, Elara felt loved. And that, somehow, was enough. The Cathedral of Shadows was not a church. It was an abandoned theater from the 1920s, all Art Deco architecture and moldering grandeur, located in a part of the city where humans didn't venture after dark. The marquee had long since fallen dark, but the building itself seemed to generate its own sense of presence, a weight in the air that made even rats avoid the surrounding blocks. Constantine and Elara arrived at 11:45 p.m., 15 minutes before the appointed time. He dressed her in clothes from the safe house, dark jeans, a black shirt, boots. Nothing fancy, but sturdy, practical for fighting if it came to that. He wore his usual suit, but he'd added something new, a silver chain around his neck bearing a pendant Elara didn't recognize, a circle bisected by a vertical line, with smaller circles at the cardinal points. "What's that?" she asked as they approached the theater's entrance. "My house sigil, the mark of the Draven bloodline." His voice was tense. "I haven't worn it in decades, but tonight I need them to remember who I am, what I was before I gave it all up." "What were you?" "Dangerous." It wasn't boasting, just fact. The theater doors opened before they could knock, revealing a tall vampire with sharp features and eyes like amber. He bowed slightly to Constantine, acknowledging rank, but his expression was cold. "Lord Draven, the council awaits." They were led to the derelict theater lobby, past peeling Art Deco posters and a concession stand that still smelled faintly of ancient popcorn. The carpet beneath their feet had been red once, but was now a color between rust and decay. The main theater had been transformed. Where rows of seats had once faced the stage, there was now a circular chamber. The seats had been ripped out, leaving only the sloping floor, and in the center sat a raised platform surrounded by 13 high-backed chairs arranged in a semicircle. 12 of those chairs were occupied. Elara felt the weight of their attention, like physical pressure. 12 pairs of eyes, red, gold, silver, even one pair pure black, fixed on her with expressions ranging from curiosity to barely conceal hostility. These were the elders, the council of the High Court, vampires who'd survived centuries through cunning, power, and ruthlessness. Constantine's hand found hers and squeezed gently before releasing. They walked together to the center of the circle, and Elara fought to keep her breathing steady. The 13th chair, the one in the center, remained empty. Constantine Draven, formerly title king of the Eastern Territories, currently self-exiled, a voice rang out from the left side of the semicircle. The speaker was a vampire who looked about 40, with silver-streaked black hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to command. "You stand before the council accused of violating the covenant of blood, specifically Article 7, miscegenation with intent to produce offspring. How do you plead?" "Guilty." Constantine's voice rang clear. "I loved a human. I fathered a child with her. I have no regrets." Murmurs rippled through the council. "And you, girl." The speaker's attention turned to Elara. "State your name and nature." "Elara, I'm Damper, The word still felt foreign in her mouth. An abomination? Someone hissed from the right side. A female vampire with hair like spun gold and a face that would have been beautiful if not for cruelty in her eyes. Lady Celeste, you'll have your chance to speak. The silver-haired vampire gestured impatiently. I am Lord Aldrich, head of the council in the absence of the crown. This tribunal will proceed according to ancient law. Constantine Draven, you will answer for your crimes. The girl will be evaluated. When we have heard all testimony and evidence, the council will vote on appropriate sanctions. Sanctions. Constantine's voice dropped to a dangerous register. You mean execution? That is one possible outcome, yes. Then let's skip the pageantry. Constantine stepped forward, and power rolled off him like heat from a furnace. Several of the council members actually leaned back. You want to kill my daughter for the crime of existing. Fine, come try. But know that I'll take half of you to hell with me before I let you touch her. Bold words from someone outnumbered 13-1. Aldrich said coolly, Are they? Constantine smiled, and it was terrifying. I seem to recall that the last time someone challenged me to single combat, I removed his head, so cleanly his body stood for 7 seconds before falling. That was 200 years ago. I've only gotten stronger since then. Enough. A new voice cut through the tension. Female, commanding, familiar. Seraphine stood from her chair, fifth from the left. This isn't a pissing contest, gentlemen. We're here to evaluate a damper, not start a civil war. Lady Seraphine speaks wisdom. Another council member said, an ancient-looking vampire with skin like parchment and eyes that held unexpected kindness. I am Lord Valen, and I propose we actually examine the girl before making decisions about her fate. Agreed, Seraphine said. She descended from her chair and approached Ilara, who fought every instinct to step back. Ilara, I'm going to ask you some questions. Answer truthfully. We can tell if you lie. Okay. Did you know what you were before last night? No. I thought I was completely human. Have you ever fed on human blood? No. I didn't even know I was supposed to. Have you ever killed anyone? No. Do you have any desire to harm humans or vampires? No. I just want to live and to know my father. Seraphine studied her for a long moment, then turned back to the council. She's remarkably human-seeming for a damper. No bloodlust, no predatory instinct, no desire for power. She's essentially a human with some enhanced abilities. That doesn't make her less dangerous. Lady Celeste interjected. She carries royal blood. If she were turned, she'd be powerful enough to challenge established hierarchies. Then we ensure she's never turned, Seraphine countered. Place a prohibition on her. Make it illegal for any vampire to transform her. Problem solved. That's not enough. Aldrich stood, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. The problem isn't what she is now. It's what she represents. A precedent. If we allow one damper to live, others will be created. Our bloodlines will be contaminated. Our power will be diluted. The Covenant exists for a reason. The Covenant was written 1,000 years ago by vampires who feared change. Seraphine shot back. Times have changed. The world has changed. We can't hide in shadows forever, enforcing laws that make us monsters. We are monsters, Celeste said flatly. That's the point. The debate raged for what felt like hours. Ilara stood in the center of the circle, feeling like an object rather than a person, while vampires argued about whether she deserved to exist. Constantine remained beside her, silent but radiating lethal intent. His hand never strayed far from hers. Finally, Aldrich raised his hand for silence. Enough. We'll vote. But first, I invoke challenge right. The room went deadly quiet. You can't be serious, Seraphine said. Challenge right is ancient law. Any council member can invoke it in cases involving capital judgment. Aldrich's smile was sharp. Constantine Draven, I challenge you to single combat. If you win, your daughter lives and goes free. If I win, she dies. And if I refuse, then the council votes, and I guarantee that vote will not go in your favor. I control 7 of the 12 votes on this council. Your daughter will be condemned, and you'll both be hunted. Constantine looked at Ilara, and she saw the calculation in his eyes. Fight and possibly die, leaving her unprotected, or refuse and guarantee her death. Neither option was acceptable. I accept, Constantine said, but I counter with terms of my own. This isn't a fight to the death. First blood ends it. Agreed. First blood. Aldrich was already removing his jacket. And since I'm feeling generous, you can even have a weapon. I won't need one. Your arrogance will be your undoing, Constantine said softly. The council members rose from their chairs and moved the edges of the chamber, creating a makeshift arena. Elara was pulled back by Seraphine, who whispered urgently in her ear, Your father is strong, but Aldrich is cunning. Watch carefully. If things go badly, I'll get you out. Why are you helping us? Because some laws deserve to be broken. Seraphine's silver eyes were fierce. And because I'm tired of living in a world where love is punished and cruelty is rewarded. In the center of the chamber, Constantine and Aldrich faced each other. To human eyes, what happened next would have been invisible, just blurs of motion too fast to track. But Elara, with her damper vision, saw everything. Aldrich moved first, crossing the distance between them in a heartbeat, his hand extended like a claw aimed at Constantine's throat. Constantine twisted aside, grabbed Aldrich's wrist, and used the elder vampire's momentum to throw him across the chamber. Aldrich recovered midair, landed in a crouch, and launched himself back even faster. They collided with a sound like thunder. For 20 seconds, they were a whirlwind of motion, strikes and counters happening multiple times per second, each blow carrying enough force to shatter concrete. The floor beneath them began to crack. Then Aldrich made a mistake. He feinted left, committed right, and left his ribs exposed for a fraction of a second. Constantine's fist connected with surgical precision, and 3 of Aldrich's ribs shattered with an audible crack. The older vampire staggered back, coughing. When he removed his hand from his mouth, it was stained with black blood. First blood, Constantine said quietly. I win. Aldrich stared at his own blood, then at Constantine, and something ugly crossed his face. No, that's not. You lost, Aldrich. Seraphine's voice was sharp. Accept defeat with grace. This doesn't end here, Aldrich said, straightening despite his injury. The law may protect her today, but laws can change. And accidents happen. Touch my daughter, and I'll do more than break your ribs. Constantine's voice promised violence. I'll end your line so completely that vampires 1,000 years from now will use your name as a cautionary tale. Is that a threat? It's a promise. Lord Valen stepped between them. Enough. The challenge is concluded. Constantine Draven wins. The girl lives. He turned to address the full council. But conditions must be set. This cannot happen again. Agreed, Seraphine said. I propose the following. Elara is granted provisional citizenship in Vampire Society. She will be registered with the council, monitored for 5 years, and prohibited from being turned under penalty of true death for any vampire who attempts it. Constantine Draven will be held responsible for her conduct. If she violates our laws, both will be punished. Seconded, Valen said. All in favor? 7 hands rose, Seraphine, Valen, and 5 others. 5 hands remained down, Aldrich, Celeste, and their faction. Motion carries. Seraphine's smile was triumphant. Elara lives. Tribunal concluded. Elara felt her legs go weak with relief. Constantine was at her side immediately, supporting her. It's over, he whispered. You're safe. For now, Aldrich said coldly as he passed them, still clutching his ribs. But this isn't finished, Draven. Not by half. I look forward to our next conversation, Constantine replied with lethal politeness. The council members filed out one by one, until only Seraphine and Valen remained. You made powerful enemies tonight, Valen said, his ancient eyes kind, but also some powerful allies. I'll do what I can to shield you from the old family's plots. Why? Constantine asked. You don't know us. No, but I knew Marianne. She played at my granddaughter's wedding years ago. Refused payment. Said she just wanted to share in the joy. Valen smiled at the memory. Anyone capable of creating someone that good deserves a chance. Both of you. He nodded to Alara. Welcome to Vampire Society, child. May you survive it. He left, leaving them alone with Seraphine. Thank you, Alara said, for speaking for us. Don't thank me yet. Aldrich isn't the forgiving type, and he's patient. He'll wait years if necessary, but he'll come for you eventually. Seraphine looked at Constantine. You need to train her properly. Teach her to defend herself against political attacks, as well as physical ones. She can't just be your daughter. She needs to be a player in Vampire Society if she's going to survive. I'll teach her everything I know. Good. Seraphine's expression softened. Marianne would be proud of you both. What you built from impossible circumstances. What you survived. She touched Alara's cheek gently. You have her spirit. That's a rare and precious thing. Don't let this world crush it. Then she was gone, leaving father and daughter alone in the abandoned theater. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Alara laughed, slightly hysterical, definitely relieved. We survived. We did. Constantine pulled her into a tight embrace. But she's right. This is just the beginning. You'll need to learn vampire politics, combat, how to navigate the courts. It won't be easy. Nothing in my life has been easy. Alara looked up at her father. At least now I won't be facing it alone. Never alone, Constantine promised. Never again. They left the Cathedral of Shadows as the first light of dawn threatened the eastern horizon. Constantine pulled his hood up against the coming sun, and they walked together through the sleeping city. What happens now? Alara asked. Now? You move into the safe house permanently. I teach you everything you need to know. We build a life together, a real one, not shadows and distance. Constantine smiled, and it transformed his face. And maybe, eventually, you go back to making music. Your mother would have wanted that. Will I be able to? With Vampire Society watching me. If I have anything to say about it, yes. You're not their prisoner. Alara, you're my daughter, and you deserve to live fully. His expression hardened. Anyone who tries to make you less than you are will answer to me. They reached the safe house as the sun broke the horizon. Constantine had to retreat immediately into the darkened interior, but he stood in the doorway watching Alara, who turned to face the sunrise. The light painted her in gold and amber, and for a moment, she looked exactly like Marianne had on the morning they'd first met. Thank you, Alara said without turning around, for fighting for me, for protecting me all these years. Thank you for giving me a reason to keep existing. Constantine's voice was rough. I've been empty for so long. Having you back, having you know me, is more than I ever thought I'd have. We'll figure this out, Alara said, finally turned to face him. Together, Constantine agreed. And for the first time in 23 years, he allowed himself to hope. The future was uncertain. Enemies lurked in vampire courts and human streets. Aldrich's faction would plot and scheme and wait for the perfect moment to strike. But for now, in this moment, Constantine had his daughter back, and she knew the truth, and they were both alive. Everything else they'd face when it came. Together. Outside, the city woke to another ordinary day. Humans rushed to work, to school, to their lives, never knowing that the previous night had seen a trial that determined whether love could exist across impossible boundaries. Never knowing that in a converted loft in the industrial district, a vampire king and his dampered daughter were starting over. Never knowing that some families weren't born, they were fought for, and the fight for Constantine and Alara had only just begun. But they were ready, because blood might make you related, but love makes you family. And their love, forged in separation, tempered by loss, and finally reunited against all odds, was strong enough to survive anything, even eternity.